everyone, and welcome to Wesley Memorial Methodist Church here in Oxford, and a particular welcome to the Starfire Singers from Los Altos Methodist Church in California. We're particularly pleased you've been able to fit us in a very busy tour. And they arrived a week ago in London, and they've had 2 concerts already in Watford and Barnet, and they've also been to the New Room in Bristol, so they've had a very busy time. And on Wednesday, they leave for Ireland, so we're very glad they've been able to fit us in. There will be a retiring collection this evening, so hopefully you pay to leave rather than pay to come in. And Starfire Singers have been particularly generous in saying, not what it says on the notice outside, that 50% is going to be for them and 50% for us, but they have very kindly donated 100% of the takings to the Open Doors project here at Wesley Memorial Church. So we're very grateful to you all. Thank you very much for that very generous donation. I know you're going to be talking and singing about poverty as part of your production, and what makes the retiring collection even more interesting is that 5% of that retiring collection is donated in partnership with us to Christian Aid, and that the money is going to be spent in Burkina Faso in West Africa. And what's even better in terms of match funding is that the European Union quadruples that 5%. So there will be a lot of money hopefully going out to Burkina Faso as a result of you being here tonight. So thank you very much for that. On a domestic issue, I need to point out the fire exits are where you came in, one over here, and there's also one behind under the school. So we hope you won't need to use them, but just so you know that they exist. Can I also ask you to turn off any mobile phones? And also, finally, really, just to say that JustiX has been written and composed by Carol and Dirk Damonte. There's Carol, and we're very grateful for you for what you have produced. I was here at one of the rehearsals this afternoon. It sounded tremendous. So, could you please give a special welcome to the Los Altos Starfire Singers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is a great privilege and a great honor to be here in Oxford, and this is the cradle of Methodism, as I guess a lot of you know, and this is our first time being in Oxford as a choir. We've come to the UK a few times, but first time coming to Oxford. We're so glad to be here and be in this beautiful church, and we're so grateful to you for hosting us, and we're so glad that we can be a part of the Open Doors campaign, and that we hope that we know that you've reached half of your goal of 1.2 million, and we hope the other half is realized tonight. And hey, it could happen. You never know. It could happen. But we are just so glad to be here, and so grateful to you for being here tonight. This is a show that was written by Carol and me, as Derek said, for this tour. We wrote it and first performed it at our church in Los Altos a couple weeks ago, and now are just so grateful to be here performing it. It's a show that has been written out of our belief that we are called as followers of Jesus to sometimes go to some tough places. As followers of Jesus, we're called sometimes to confront uncomfortable things, and sometimes we're called to live in that uncomfortableness or discomfort, and to think about and to face why it is we're feeling uncomfortable. We, as Christians, we follow the cross, and we're called to follow the cross, and that does mean not just always being happy and smiley, but being where Jesus is. And Jesus is with the lost and the least, and those who have been abused and those who have been left out on the margins of society. And by following Jesus to those places, and only by following Jesus to those places, really, can we find the deep hope that comes as Jesus followers out of the experience of the cross and out of the experience of our faith. So it might get a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning of the show, the first half of the show, as we confront some of the issues that face us as a society today. I invite you to live in that discomfort for a little bit and maybe ask questions about why it makes you uncomfortable, and then stay with us as we go into hope, as we move to hope and move to the promise of our faith. Because faith is about finding hope, not a superficial hope, but a deep hope that comes from being in those places where Jesus is. So it is our joy to be here, and it is our privilege to present to you JustiX.
Then Jesus began to teach his disciples, "The human one must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and the legal experts, and be killed. And then, after 3 days, rise from the dead." He said this plainly, but Peter took hold of Jesus and, scolding him, began to correct him. Jesus turned to look at his disciples, then sternly corrected Peter. "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking God's thoughts, but human thoughts." After calling the crowd together with his disciples, Jesus said to them, "All who want to come after me might say no to themselves, take up their cross and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them. But all who lose their lives because of me, because of the good news, will save them. Why would people gain the whole world but lose their lives? What will people give in exchange for their lives?"
What is that supposed to mean? How am I supposed to live like that? What does that mean, say no to yourself, take up your cross and follow me? How are we supposed to do that?
To understand, you have to understand the cross.
Exactly. That's my problem. I don't understand. How can I take up my cross if I don't even understand the cross Jesus took up?
Look more closely at the cross.
See where it takes you.
See where it takes us?
Yeah, look at it, examine it, take it apart. It'll lead you to answers.
Wait, what's happening?
Remember, follow the cross. See where it takes you.
But they're taking it apart. It's not a cross anymore.
Follow the pieces. You'll see. It's a difficult journey, but it's a journey of understanding. It's a journey of discipleship. It's a journey of faith.
Okay, we'll try.
These pieces will lead you to understanding.
Sometimes, in order to understand the whole, you have to understand the pieces more completely.
Alright, but where are we gonna end up?
That's part of the journey. You don't know where you'll end up until you begin.
But that's scary.
It can be, but remember what the cross is all about. It's about pain, suffering, and betrayal.
But it doesn't end there. Always remember that it's about love.
And always remember that you'll never be traveling alone.
Luke 14:12-14. Then Jesus said to the person who had invited him, "When you host a lunch or dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers and sisters, your relatives, or rich neighbors. If you do, they will invite you in return, and that will be your reward. Instead, when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they can't repay you. Instead, you will be repaid when the just are resurrected."
The first piece of the cross has led you to encounter some of the homeless and hungry in the world. These are people all around you. You probably walk by them almost every day. Some days you walk by, you don't even see them. Other days you pretend you don't see. Some days you actually reach in your pocket, give them some spare change, pound, maybe two. Other days you pretend you don't have any money at all.
They weren't invisible to Jesus. They aren't invisible to Jesus.
So here they are, and here's the first piece of the cross of Jesus.
I'm not sure I get this. What does this have to do with taking up my cross?
Yeah, how does this piece of the cross bring us here?
Like we said, these are some of the homeless and hungry in the world. These are some of the people Jesus hung out with.
And these are some of the people that Jesus gave his life for. People who were rejected by society, people who were on the fringe.
Yeah, I get that. I just don't understand how this answers our question of what it means for us to follow Jesus.
You followed the first piece of the cross in a place you probably haven't ever really been before. Part of following Jesus means seeing the world through Jesus' eyes. That means seeing people and situations with eyes of love and compassion.
And that means hearing through Jesus' ears. And that means listening to their stories. Come on, hear what they have to say.
I live mostly on the northeast part of town, near the warehouse district. I mean, that's my spot, where my stuff is. Sometimes I'll get a bed in the shelter, but you have to get up early for those. They fill up fast. People ask me how I got here. I don't really know, to be honest. Certainly not where I plan to be. All I know is at night I get so scared. I don't know where to look for hope or for safety. I don't think I can trust anyone anymore.
I live under the overpass. I sleep there most nights. I call the bridge 1023. There's this woman that stops by and helps me out sometimes, buys me coffee, a hot meal every now and then. She calls the bridge 1023. I think that's because that's the day she first learned it's where I live. I don't know, just sort of stuck for a name. How I identify it from all the other overpasses that look like it. I walk over to Starbucks most mornings. I'll sit outside and count coins people give me till I have enough to buy a cup of coffee. People give me their change, but sometimes they drop foreign coins onto the table. What do they want me to do with those? Most of the time, they don't look at me, and they almost never talk to me.
I live in the part of the city that people call shame. Well, there's other names. There's the more official names that the street signs say. But most people call it shame. And it is a shame. It's a shame that there are parts of the city like this. It's a shame that there's so many of us sleeping on the streets out there. It's a shame the way addictions and mental illnesses grip so many of us, and there just aren't the resources to get help. Mostly, it's a shame that people step over me, or cross to the other side of the street, or pretend they don't see me while they're on the way to work, or to the movies, or to go shopping. I'm here, living in shame.
Wow, you're right. I really haven't heard stories like these before. I know. Stopping and listening makes you realize that each one of these people are people who are living lives and struggling to make it, and they'll have real hopes and dreams and joys and real sorrows.
The cross is about Jesus being willing to lay it all down, to give it all up, everything for us. What are we willing to give up to bring healing to this world?
Isaiah 41:10. Don't fear, because I am with you. Don't be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will surely help you. I will hold you with my righteous, strong hand.
Wow, that was tough. That's a hard question. Do you really want to give it up?
I know. What does that really mean, anyway? I mean, Jesus' disciples gave up everything to follow him. Is that what that's about?
Maybe it's about giving up our preconceived notions, really seeing the homeless, really listening to their stories.
Or giving up our excuses. That can be so scary. That scripture from Isaiah, don't fear because I am with you, that can be good to remember. It can bring a lot of comfort.
Well, what's next? Where's the second piece of the cross taking us?
The second piece of the cross has led you to the grim truth of slavery.
Slavery? Didn't that end 150 years ago?
Sadly, no, not at all. In fact, there are more slaves living worldwide today than at any point in human history. More than when the Hebrew people were slaves in Egypt. More than when Africans were kidnapped and brought to the United States against their will. The slave trade is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, a $32 billion business. There are more than 27 million people enslaved around the world today. At least 27 million people being completely controlled by another person, suffering beatings or threats of beatings, being forced to do things for someone else's selfishness and greed.
But that's all over in countries we've barely heard of, places we'll never go to. There's nothing we can do about it here.
Well, yeah, that's what a lot of people think, but really, that's not true at all.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, it's happening all around us. We just don't see it. But every big city has more human trafficking going on than you guys can even imagine.
Right. It happens in the United States. It happens in places like the Philippines and Cambodia. It happens in Europe, like in the Netherlands. It's everywhere. But no matter where it is, there's plenty we can do about it.
And it happens to all kinds of people. Men, women, adults, and children. People in developing countries. People in the most developed countries, and everywhere in between.
Wow, 27 million. I don't know, those numbers are completely overwhelming.
They are, but the first step is to put a face to each number, to see each number as a person who's suffering.
I guess it's like what we found with the homeless people. When we stopped to look at them, to be with them and hear their stories, they stopped being a statistic. They stopped being someone we'd ignore. They became real.
Well, that's definitely also true of the women, the children, and the men who are victims of human trafficking and slavery. They are very real, and they are suffering every day.
They are. And it might seem like they're invisible to us, but that's because we haven't learned where to look, what to see, or even what to listen for.
When we hear their stories, our hearts break for them. Our hearts break with them.
My friend, this child, she is my daughter, this young boy is my son. So don't turn away from the face that you see. He may be just 1 in 27 million, but he's everything to me. Down woman just of age, try to hide your pent-up rage. I cry with you, oh I pray for you. Just beneath the scars of pain are memories that all have names. I cry with you, oh I pray for you. I cry with you, oh, I pray for you.
Weary man been taught through shame, spirit, soul, and limbs in chains. I cry with you. Oh, I pray for you.
Isaiah 31, 1 through 5. Doom to those going down to Egypt for help. They rely on horses, trust in chariots because they are many, and on riders because they are very strong. But they don't look to the Holy One of Israel. They don't seek the Lord. But God also knows how to bring disaster. He has not taken back his words. God will rise up against the house of evildoers and against the help of those who do wrong. Egypt is human, not divine. Their horse is flesh, not spirit. The Lord will extend his hand. The helper will stumble. Those helped will fall, and they will all die together.
You know, it's just like with the homeless. It's about hearing stories and seeing faces.
So much seems like it's about opening our eyes to things that are going on right around us.
It is, but it feels so overwhelming. What are we supposed to do about it?
I guess the first part of following the cross is seeing it, really knowing it.
And once we do, we can't just keep going with our Bible studies and youth group meetings and Sunday morning worship, pretending like we don't know.
Yeah, I know, but then what?
I don't know. I guess we'll see. We still have more parts of the cross to follow.
The third stick is for war and violence.
Are we going into a war?
No, not into a war. This part of the cross is for all of those affected by war and violence everywhere.
Currently, there are 10 conflicts going on in the world that cause 1,000 or more casualties a year.
There are?
Yeah, and some of them are decades old. In Burma, or Myanmar, more than 200,000 people have been killed since 1948. 65 years it's been going on. Last year alone, more than 12,000 civilians were killed in the violence there.
Or Afghanistan. Did you know that between 1.5 to 2 million people have been killed there since 1978? Last year, there were almost 9,000 deaths.
Or there's the Mexican drug war.
Well, that's not really a war.
It's not? More than 86,000 people have been killed in that conflict since 2006. Last year, it was over 18,000. Just in the first 3 months of this year, it's over 3,000.
And besides those other larger conflicts, there are at least 32 other countries suffering casualties right now.
Like insurgencies in Yemen, or Thailand, or North Caucasus, or the Philippines, each which had hundreds of deaths last year.
Or wherever there's a terrorist attack, like the Boston Marathon, or the young British soldier who was attacked on the street in May.
More mind-numbing numbers and statistics.
And as we're learning, every single number represents a real person, a real family, real pain, real suffering.
And sadly, it's not just those killed by war and violence or their families that suffer.
No, not at all. By the end of 2011, 42.5 million people had been forcibly displaced from their homes due to war and violence.
And every minute of every day, 8 people leave everything behind to escape war, persecution, or terror. Every minute.
Some of these conflicts have been going on for generations. Some are new flaring up of old hostilities. Some are brand new tragic conflicts.
But in every case, wars fought over religion or political struggles or ethnic tension or anything else ultimately impact those that have no power, no control, and no say in the conflict at all.
And that is where the cross leads us.
Everywhere we turn, another gang fight, dark night, ignite a firelight. I don't care who's right. Young man's brave side, on guard, beware. Enemies are everywhere. Once again, there is another fall.
Muster up the troops, it's time to declare warfare. Beware being scared. It's our nightmare to know they're out there. On guard, beware. Enemies are everywhere. Don't waste time, you know you have to make war. Settle score, close door, uproar. Beat them before they beat us more. On guard, beware. Enemies are everywhere. Sticks, stones, break bones, much might makes right. Bombs dropped by drones. Just war, just fight. Get them or get gone. Win now at all costs. Wars must be fought. For the brave souls lost. Since time began, it's always been this way. Same old fight, it's just a different day. If we've been wrong, someone has to pay. This is the game that we all must play. Since time began, it's always been this way. Same old fight, it's just a different day. If we've been wrong, someone has to pay. This is the game that we all must play.
Because of the grace that God gave me, I can say to each one of you, don't go think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Instead, be reasonable, since God has measured out a portion of faith to each one of you. We have many parts in one body, but the parts don't all have the same function. In the same way, though there are many of us, we are one body in Christ, and individually, we belong to each other. We have different gifts that are consistent with God's grace that has been given to us. If your gift is prophecy, you should prophesy in proportion to your faith. If your gift is service, devote yourself to serving. If your gift is teaching, devote yourself to encouraging. The one giving should do it with no strings attached. The leader should lead with passion. The one showing mercy should be cheerful. Love should be shown without pretending. Hate evil and hold on to what is good. Love each other like the members of your family. Be the best at showing honor to each other. Don't hesitate to be enthusiastic. Be on fire in the Spirit as you serve the Lord. Be happy in your hope. Stand your ground when you're in trouble, and devote yourself to prayer. Contribute to the needs of God's people, and welcome strangers into your home. Bless people who harass you. Bless and don't curse them. Be happy with those who are happy, and cry with those who are crying. Consider everyone as equal, and don't think that you're better than anyone else. Instead, associate with people who have no status. Don't think that you're so smart. Don't pay back anyone for their evil actions with evil actions, but show respect for what everyone else believes is good. If possible, to the best of your ability, live at peace with all people.
She's so ugly.
She's so hot.
Muslims are all terrorists.
Jews are so stingy. Christians are incredibly judgmental.
That's not very feminine of you.
People on welfare are so lazy.
She is way too skinny.
He's such a retard.
What are you guys doing? You're being so cruel.
If you'd seen what we've seen so far, you wouldn't be saying such vicious things.
This is all so petty and stupid compared to what we've just seen.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, there's homelessness, trafficking, and slavery, and violence going on all over the world. And all of you are just judging people based on superficial prejudice.
Whoa, that's the thing. These are all examples of how it is easy for people to fall into this trap of labeling each other and judging each other. This is where most of all those other problems start, with prejudice and discrimination.
Prejudice and discrimination can lead us into one place, into the middle of hate speech.
So we can draw lines?
And put up walls.
And keep people out. And keep ourselves safe. And that's why people are dehumanized. That's why the homeless beg for another meal. That's why they don't have a place to sleep at night.
Yeah, I can see how it's all connected.
And that's why the cross leads you here, leads you into the middle of hate speech, which can be as simple as calling someone against their race, or as cruel as degrading them. But the freedom that Jesus brings is only freedom if it's available to everyone. Justice can't happen where there is prejudice and discrimination. Discrimination and prejudice make us blind to each other. Make us put each other out. Make us slaves drawn to hatred and narrow-mindedness. Freedom won't happen until we break down those walls. Can't you see what's inside of me? Don't you want to understand? Dare I say, oh, we could be such good friends. But you seal up the door, throw the key on the floor as you're plunging for more. As you push aside God's freedom.
25, 31 through 45. Now when the human one comes in his majesty, and all his angels are with him, he will sit on his majestic throne. All the nations will be gathered in front of him. He will separate them from each other, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right, but the goats he will put on his left. Then he will say to those on his right, "Come, you who will receive good things from my Father. Inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world began. I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then those who are righteous will reply, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes to wear? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" Then the king will reply, "I assure you that when you have done it for one of the least of these, brothers and sisters of mine, you have done it for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Get away from me, you who will receive terrible things. Go into the unending fire that has been prepared for the devil and his angels. I was hungry, and you didn't give me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me anything to drink. I was a stranger, and you didn't welcome me. I was naked, and you didn't give me clothes to wear. I was sick and in prison, and you didn't visit me." Then those on his left will reply, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or naked, or sick and in prison, and didn't do anything to help you?" Then the king will answer, "I assure you that when you haven't done it for one of the least of these, you haven't done it for me."
Well, this is exhausting and so discouraging. Homelessness, trafficking and slavery, war and violence, prejudice and discrimination. It's overwhelming.
And there's another stick, another part of the cross still to hear.
There is, although really this part incorporates all the other parts as well. This is the stick of poverty.
And everything you've seen so far, homelessness, slavery and trafficking, war and violence, prejudice and discrimination, all have roots in poverty.
Poverty grips people. It's a prison that can feel impossible to get out of.
Whether it's a single mother working 3 jobs to put food on the table for her children, or the migrant worker moving from place to find food to feed his family, or the children living in the dumps to find in Cambodia or the Philippines, poverty brings pain and struggle and heartache into people's lives.
It brings hopelessness too.
And sickness and grief.
And it leads people to desperation.
It turns neighbor against neighbor, village against village, country against country.
And the numbers are staggering.
Orphans due to
matters. 1 billion people here on the earth live in squalor in city slums. 28% of children are underweight. 20% of us consume 80% of resources. 1% of money spent on weapons can send every child to school to graduate. Numbers overwhelm, they leave us numb, too much to bear. We want to make a difference, we want to show we care. But how can people such as us do anything that matters? These numbers take our grand ideals and they leave them all in tatters. This is all so overwhelming.
I know. We followed the cross, or pieces of the cross anyway, and all it's done is led us to some dark, depressing places.
It just feels so hopeless. I mean, sure, it's raised our awareness, but it seems like it's just made us more aware of how much pain and suffering and despair there is in the world.
It feels like there's no way we can do anything to alleviate even a tiny percentage of it.
That's what I'm saying. It's hopeless.
But there's got to be a reason why we were led to these places. There's got to be some purpose to it.
Yeah, remember, this all started because we were wondering what it means to take up our cross and follow Jesus. I mean, that's why we started following in the first
I have a feeling we're about to find out.
That's right. Don't give up. Not yet. Not after you've come this far.
You followed the pieces of the cross into these places of brokenness and pain.
You've seen how the cross enters into places of poverty, and war and violence, and prejudice and discrimination.
The pieces of the cross enter into those places and into the darkness of human trafficking and slavery, but they don't stay there.
What do you mean they don't stay there?
The cross is an instrument of suffering. It was created by human cruelty.
Its sole purpose was to destroy.
Through unimaginable pain, suffering, and agony.
Right, we get that. And we get that it's still present in our world in so many places and in so many ways.
Yeah, so this instrument of pain, torture, and death has led us to some places of real injustice, pain, and suffering in our world. Fine, lesson learned. But where's the hope?
The hope begins right where pain and suffering are. The hope is that God's love does not run away from these places.
Hardly. God's love goes deep into those places. God weeps with the grieving, suffers with the suffering, struggles with the struggling.
That's the point of following the cross into these places. What was intended to inflict the most pain ultimately conveyed the most love.
You've only followed the cross halfway. You followed it into the broken places. Now, follow it back into wholeness. Jesus touched lepers, forgave those fallen from grace, ate with the outcast and the marginalized. All so that God's love would infuse them, so that hope might spring up where despair had darkened their lives.
Isaiah 58, verses 6 through 8. Isn't this the fast I choose, releasing wicked restraints, untying the ropes of a yoke, setting free the mistreated and breaking every yoke? Isn't it sharing your bread with the hungry and bringing the homeless poor into your house, covering the naked when you see them and not hiding from your own family? Then your light will break out like the dawn, and you will be healed quickly. Your own righteousness will walk before you, and the Lord's glory will be your rear guard.
Yes, there's suffering on our streets and in every nation of the world.
You followed the cross into some of these places earlier. Well, the people are still there.
Only now, we're not just sorting out whatever spare change someone might throw our way.
Now we've got a place where at least we'll know we'll get a good meal.
All of this is a church social hall, transformed a few times a week into a warm, dry place where people can come and get a decent meal.
You see, when the cross led people to see the faces on the streets, it touched their hearts. It moved them to take action.
It's part of bold service and social justice. We have teams like this team here that go to where the need is and do things to try and alleviate some of the immediate need.
And we have advocacy groups that study the issues and work to change the systems that lead to the needs in the first place.
What it really is about is following the cross to where the hurt, the hungry, and the homeless are, and showing up.
Showing up means bringing what we've learned, seen through freshly opened eyes, and being willing to enter into the story, to see and to touch and hear and feel.
If we want hope, hope, hope for the world. If we want hope, hope, hope for this big old world of ours. Hope, hope, hope for love. What we gotta do is show up. We gotta show up for the homeless and make
Micah 6:8. He has told you, human one, what is good and what the Lord requires from you. To do justice, embrace faithful love, and walk humbly with your God.
Remember this stick?
Of course, how could we forget? Slavery, trafficking, 27 million victims.
All around the world. In some ways, that was the most depressing stick of all.
Yeah, when we first learn of such tragedy, especially tragedy brought on completely by human greed and cruelty, it can bring on immense sadness.
And a sense of futility. What can one person do in the face of 27 million or more victims?
That's why injustices such as human trafficking get perpetuated. Good people become paralyzed, and in their paralysis, they don't do anything to bring about change.
So what can people do?
Well, first off, people can pay attention to what they buy and even where it comes from. Find out if your clothes are made in sweatshops in developing countries, and always, remember, check out the source of your chocolate.
Chocolate? Uh-huh. And not just chocolate. A lot of the food, the clothes, and the electronics that we love comes to us through the hands of institutionalized slavery.
So yeah, the first step is being informed. When injustice looks you in the eye, your choice is to look away or to open your eyes.
And we're here because we've kept our eyes open.
Exactly. And once you've educated yourself about what you buy and where it comes from, you can open your eyes wider and see the people, the real, living, breathing, dreaming, hoping people, all affected by trafficking and slavery.
And then you see the hope. People who have taken the time to really see the face of their sister and brother in the face of the abused can't help but connect with them. And there are organizations with their feet on the ground helping rescue the victims of trafficking, helping fight for the laws to protect men, women, and children.
There are missionaries working every day to create viable and sustainable means for people to support their family so that they don't see selling their daughters and sons or themselves as the only way out of their poverty.
People follow the cross into and then through and out of the bondage of human trafficking and slavery live according to the call of the prophet Micah. He has told you, human one, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to do justice, to embrace faithful love, and to walk humbly with your God.
Chaos
Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God.
It's good to see you again.
So are we going to put an end to war and violence?
We're going to believe we can.
We are going to be the voice saying that war and violence aren't the way.
We are going to advocate for those affected by war and violence, for the men, women, and children, the orphans, the widows, the refugees.
It's all over the Bible. God's call for us to be peacemakers. God's longing for us to know peace, to know shalom with each other.
Isaiah 54:10 says, "The mountains may shift and the hills may be shaken, but my faithful love won't shift from you, and my covenant of peace won't be shaken, says the Lord, the one who pities you."
And Jeremiah 29:7, where the prophet says, "Promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord for it, because your future depends on its welfare."
God calls us as part of God's covenant people to the community of Shalom. God calls us to constantly be expanding our vision of this community, to welcome the exile, the outcast, the alien, to live in covenant with each other, just as God lives in covenant with us. Jesus summed it up best when he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God."
You'll be called the children. You'll be called the children of God. You'll be called the children. You'll be called the children of God when you make peace. Make peace. When you make peace. You are the children of God.
Peace must be made, worked out, not discovered. Peace comes when God's justice is recovered. Oh, 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 oh. Peace is what we do with one another. When we live as God's children, sister, brother, we are called to be makers of peace. Hatred, war, and violence must cease. Oh, 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 oh. Jesus said to practice what we preach, to be the hands and feet of Christ to each.
You'll be called the children. You'll be called the children of God. You'll be called the children. You'll be called the children of God when you make peace. Make peace. When you make peace. You are the children of God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Jesus said it. We're called to live it, called to be it, to make it so. Love for God, for others, for self. Jesus said that this is the way. May our lives be acts of peace, so that everyone can know.
You'll be called the children.
Galatians 3:28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for we are all one in Christ Jesus.
When you followed this piece of the cross before, you came into a world where people just couldn't or wouldn't see each other. They judge each other based on superficialities, on prejudices, on stereotypes.
It probably seemed kind of petty, the way we made assumptions about each other based on nationality, or sexual orientation, or gender, or body type, or skin color.
And it is. That's the point. It's totally superficial.
And yet so many of the other things we've seen on this journey, war and violence, slavery and trafficking, even homelessness and poverty, can trace many, if not all, of their roots back to discrimination, prejudice, hatred, and fear.
People put other people in boxes, in categories, and then treat them according to their intolerant perceptions.
People in power think the only way to hold on to their power is to keep other people out of it, to keep them in their place.
Which all too often means keeping them oppressed, beaten down, subjugated.
But again, that's not how God views things. That's not how he views the human community.
1 Samuel chapter 16 verse 7 says, God doesn't look at things like humans do. Humans see only what is visible to the eyes, but the Lord sees into the heart.
And it is even more basic than that. In the first chapter of Genesis, it says God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God makes no distinction. We're all created in God's image.
And Jesus makes it very clear when he says in the Gospel of Matthew, don't judge, so you won't be judged.
So our call is first to live how Jesus calls us to live, not judging others, welcoming others into the Shalom community, believing as Paul wrote, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for we are all one. And then we are called to reach out to those who've known the tyranny of prejudice, hatred, discrimination, injustice, and help them rise again.
We can be like the phoenix, rising from the ashes. We can take our old selves, the ones that hated others, who judged without knowing, who try to isolate and separate based on looks, gender, race, and religion, and leave those old selves behind. Let them be the ashes.
Yes, and by leaving them behind, we can rise together, all of us. We can rise together and find hope and healing.
Out of
Luke 6:20 and 21. Then he looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh."
And here is your final piece. Like prejudice and discrimination, poverty is a constant that runs through most, if not all, the injustices we've encountered.
And poverty is something that every single one of us carries with us. There's a very real, tangible poverty of the poor among us.
And there's the poverty of spirit, the poverty of hope, the poverty of connection that so many others live in and with. Sometimes they can be even harder to reach because they often don't even know that they're poor.
But didn't Jesus say, "Here, the poor will always be with you"? Wasn't he just saying there's nothing we can do for them?
Hardly. Jesus was paraphrasing, as he often did, from the Hebrew scripture of Deuteronomy, saying that poor persons will never disappear from the earth.
Exactly. There will always be poor people.
But which goes on to say, that's why I'm giving you this command. You must open your hand generously to your fellow Israelites, to the needy among you, and to the poor who live with you in your land.
Jesus wasn't saying to ignore the poor or to accept poverty. He was saying we will always be called to reach out to the needy, to share what we have, and to be in connection with the poor among us.
He was really saying you will always have the opportunity to serve the poor.
Remember, it was Jesus who said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled."
Jesus calls us to be blessing to each other.
I get it. Now the cross is complete.
We follow the cross into places where people are hurting, suffering, broken.
Where injustice has caused people great pain and extreme hardship.
Yes, the cross is a symbol of that brokenness.
And yet, God's love didn't shy away from going into that brokenness.
Or even suffering with the broken, the lost, the abandoned, the marginalized.
I think that's the point. That's what taking up the cross means. It means following Jesus into places where we might not want to go.
But places where God's love is most needed.
And where God may be depending upon us to shine the light of that love.
Exactly. Because you see, that very same cross, which once symbolized the brokenness and suffering and humiliation of crucifixion, that very same cross, which was devised by the cruelest and most hard-hearted parts of humanity's imagination, that cross is the very place that Jesus went, unflinchingly, because not to go would have been to really give in to the temptations and powers of our inhumanity. Jesus carried that cross and sacrificed himself on that cross so that it and we could know hope again.
The hope that only comes when we've seen the faces of the struggling, acknowledged our own struggles, and we've seen the broken made whole again.
Made whole by the power and the promise and the hope of God's unending love.
No matter what, it is that hope, that promise, that love, which puts the pieces back together and calls us into the very heart of that love.
The whole point of the cross, this cross, is that it isn't the final answer. Suffering, cruelty, hatred are no match for God's love.
Right, because Jesus was willing to go to any lengths, even to be crucified on the cross, to show us that God's love will do anything. Anything for us. And then God's love couldn't be silenced or sealed in the tomb, even by that cross. God's love won. God's love wins.
God's love wins and lives and keeps on loving through it all. We may feel like giving up, but God doesn't.
God sees every one of us, every single one of us, as precious, as sacred children of God. God will never give up on any of us.
When we think it's all over, when we think all hope is gone, it's only because we've forgotten that message. We've forgotten that it is from those darkest places that the light shines.
It is from those places of despair that joy sings again.
Because God's love is the song of joy, the light that shines in the darkness. God's love is the hope that springs from the hopelessness. Light shines, joy sings, hope springs.
word justice is all about a journey, an evolution. And it takes you into places that make you very uncomfortable. And that's a good thing. Because it's in those dark places that our lives can be transformed for good. It's in those places that we are empowered to make change. Not because it feels good, but because it is the right thing to do. I don't believe that justice is an option. As Micah tells us in the scriptures, justice is a requirement, not a suggestion. I pray that tonight you have been led into the word of uncomfortable. And I pray that you have also been led from that word into the place where hope springs. It's when we live out these words, the words of peace and abundance and inclusion and freedom and abundance and home. It's in those places that we can see and feel that justice is proclaimed. That we have the chance and the opportunity, and that we are called to rise up from the ashes of injustice. So tonight, when you offer up your offering of money, when you leave, it's really easy to walk out and slip by and not give. But I want you to know what you're giving for tonight. Because it isn't just about giving to do this, to help rebuild this parts of these churches, this church that will reach out into the community. The money that's going to rebuild the parts of this church are so that it can reach out into this world. So the church doesn't stay right here in this building, but so this building becomes a place that lives out there. And your money tonight will go to freeing someone from slavery. And it will go to feeding the hungry. And it will go to educating children. And bringing the name of God to all those healing from exploitation. Your gift is a gift for justice, for the least of these in our community, in this country, and in our world. So please, when you leave, give with generous hearts for justice. And before we close tonight, we would like to invite anyone who is here that are alumni in this group that might be here tonight to come sing our closing song. And as they come to join us, I just want to tell you a little bit about this song, our closing song. It's called Starfire. The reason I tell you about this is because it was co-written by a British composer, lyricist, with Dirk and me about 1991, I think it was. We were about ready to take our first overseas trip with this group. Our first overseas trip, we decided to go to Soviet Russia. I don't know what we were thinking. We were young and we thought, oh, Soviet Russia. But what ended up happening out of that was Brian Wren, the composer, or actually the lyricist, says, I like that name Starfire. What does it mean? So we talked about it. And he said, I want to write a song. And so in there he says in this, Starfire never makes suns on the earth. And people have come to us over the years and said, what does that mean? Never makes suns on the earth. What he was talking about at that time, that was just the summer, or in spring and summer, where the Berlin Wall was falling, where communism was falling apart. And it was about never making nuclear suns on this earth, and that a group like this could perhaps be part of the promise that we could change this world. And that doing it hand in hand with the one born at the manger could make a difference to us, so we could go out in the world and make a difference for Christ and with Christ. Again, that's what your giving tonight does. It lifts you into the place of not just listening to the words of justice, but about hearing the words and being people of justice. Sitting down and watching it happen, that's not going to cut it as our world changes. We have to all be makers of justice. Remember that as you leave. As you take these programs, you read through the words. Don't just listen to words of justice. justice. Be speakers and believers and proclaimers of justice.